The Sustainable Voice, bringing you big successes from small places worldwide.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Sustainable Voice. This is Ashish along with my lovely co host, Leigh. How are you?
I am great,
Uh,
great. Happy to be with you. Every Friday that we get to be together is great.
Absolutely. And this is a Friday that just dawned on me, and then maybe it's because I'm a little bit slow on the uptake today. But it just dawned on me that this is as we're recording this. This is the Friday before Father's Day.
Yes.
My first Father's Day without my father, and a day that I honestly speaking, we appreciated, but I don't know that I fully understood how powerful the day was. I think I'm going
Yeah.
to find out on Sunday. I have a shirt that my daughter gave my father and I that we wear on Father's Day, and it says, "I keep all my dad jokes in my dad base."
That's awesome. You're gonna wear it?
I think I'm gonna wear it. I'm gonna wear it on Sunday.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
It'll be there. So we are talking today about something that I think is pretty dear to both of us, and we've talked a lot about the amazing job you've done, in particular, raising your girls,
Mm.
and who they're becoming. They're in university now. Where are they going to school?
Well, I have one who is graduated now, and she is in the Air Force,
Hmm.
currently in flight school, which I'm very proud of her about. And then my other daughter uh, is at Clemson University. She's got one semester left.
There you go. I
So
mean, and it wasn't easy. You actually had a obviously a lot of water to carry, right, in raising these two.
yeah.
So you were both mom and dad for a long time.
I was, and they are exceptional. I think that that's often the case with a kid who's got one parent. They tend to be, I think overachievers is the wrong word, but they tend to
Hmm.
be driven, and mine certainly were. And so I didn't have to push them hard. I just had to help them, you know. I just had to guide them, but they were both really motivated, and they had a great high school and have had a great college experience, and
So
they're pretty motivated. So,
so let's talk about this because today we are talking about life-shaping experiences, right?
hmm
How travel can be a form of life-shaping experiences. I'm a firm believer that whenever we come to any part of life, there's something that just clicks, right? So something happens that everything just clicks on a certain way. You're like, oh, I get it now.
yes,
Whether it's when your children are babies and they first see you with their eyes, they smile like, oh, that the child sees me now, or when they say their first word, or when they start putting some of the things of life together. When did you figure out that your kids had started putting life together? At what age were they when you started looking, saying, okay, they're starting to really understand how the world works?
oh man. They're pretty young, but I think when they're unfiltered and they're young, the things that
Hmm.
come out of their mouth, that whole cliche out of the mouth of babes, but really some of the things that would come out of their mouths. I mean, I had um my oldest daughter was up in an airplane at I think age 5 or something like that,
There
and
you go.
and she said, she's looking out the window saying, I cannot see heaven from here, I'm not so sure about it, you know
Wow.
so because she
Wow.
assumed if you were in an airplane that you would be
You'd
able
see
to
it.
see heaven. So I mean, they were having, which my point is, they were having deep thoughts at a young age.
How
you know
old were they? Like, how old were they? Like 5, 6? How
5,
old?
yeah, 5, 6, something like that. Yeah.
That's that's kind of the same thing. I mean, I
hmm
my kids were on a plane for the first time when they were younger. I joke with everybody that JetBlue charges for headphones now because of my son. Uh,
yeah.
he would, give them back in pieces. So anybody who flies JetBlue and pays for headphones, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. Uh, it is. I mean, what about for you? Do you remember when you were a child? Do you remember when you started putting all of it together, where it just started clicking? Was there a moment where you remember when you from your childhood where things just clicked?
Um, Ashish, things didn't click for me and really have focus in what I wanted to do until my mid 20s when I joined the Coast Guard. Um, I wasn't I had a great adventurous childhood and all that, but
Mm.
I wasn't a deep thinker. Like I didn't think much past what my next fun thing to do was going to be until I was probably in my 20s, truly. But yeah, what about you? When did you
No, it's
start
about the
thinking about
same.
that?
It's about the same. And
Mhm.
that's exactly where I wanted to go with this conversation, because our children are putting things together in life much faster
Mhm.
than we did.
Mhm.
Because my children the same way. Mine are a bit younger than yours, but the same way. They were 5, 6, or 7, and they start
Mhm.
making certain comments, and it just clicks. It's exactly right. For me, it was the same thing. It was, I think it was, might have been in my early, I might have been 18, 19, whatever the case may be. But it was much later in life
Mhm.
that it clicked. Now, we've both traveled well. You and I
Mhm.
have both
Yeah.
traveled around the world. We've seen the world. And I have to say that that shaped a lot of who I've become. Right. Some of my earliest experiences were when I was 4 years old, and, was basically within about 3 feet of an elephant's eyeball while brushing my teeth in a treehouse in
Mhm.
Kenya. Right. And I was, 4 years old, and a monkey stole my camera. Or at 14, when I was in Costa Rica, when Arenal volcano was actually erupting,
Wow.
and I was taking pictures, and then we were going up the side because the caldera was angled, taking pictures of
Mhm.
lava at night, and I guess a piece of ash landed on my camera lens and burned it all the way through.
No kidding. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and I was by
Wow.
myself, right? And I'm so
Oh,
so
at
I was
14?
I 14. I took my
Yeah.
first I took my first overseas trip by myself when I was 8. I went back to Kenya. I
Yeah.
climbed Kilimanjaro at 14, and then was in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
What about you? When did you first start traveling by yourself?
Oh gosh, I again late it was later. Well, yeah, I guess it was in my 20s. Well, see, I don't think you get to count being put on a plane because your parents were divorced, but I was
No, it
on
counts. It
on
counts.
planes, Piedmont Airlines, which of course is no longer in business,
I
sitting on
remember Piedmont Airlines.
prop jets,
Yeah.
with and yeah, so I have memories of that doing that at like 10 years
Yep.
old, um,
Yep.
getting on planes. And I guess so for me, I grew up in the 70s, so a lot of our traveling was in the back of the family station wagon. It was a lot like the Chevy Chase movies,
Mhm.
that was where we started with travel. But traveling by myself, yeah, probably as a kid, getting put on the plane to go see my mom during the
Yeah, and
holidays.
that
Yeah.
counts. That counts,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you start seeing life isn't all about Mickey
Mhm.
Mouse. Life isn't all just, roses and
Yeah.
daisies. There's other sides to it. And I think so. You were flying basically by yourself on Piedmont Airlines. Were you counting the revolutions in the propellers as you were flying?
Oh man. Yeah, because it was scary, Ashish. They talk about all this turbulence now that people experience, but I swear I have never been more. I was probably scared because I was young and I was scared, but yeah,
Sure.
I remember that was just the scariest. One of the flights was really scary. There's a lot of
Mhm.
turbulence and it was dark and stormy night and all of that. And, you know,
Well,
it was
see, think
wild.
about this. So you basically just got a math lesson looking at the propellers. You just
I
got a
did.
physics lesson with turbulence.
Mm-hmm.
You basically got a geography lesson with where you were flying. That's just it.
Yeah.
We were having to piece things together. We didn't have social media. We didn't have, virtual learning. We were piecing things together, and our kids today are piecing things together at a much faster clip.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. You mentioned that your eldest is now in the Air Force. She's in flight school,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
and she's gonna be a pilot, a fighter pilot, obviously.
Some
That's
kind. I hope not fighter, but but wherever she will do what they tell her to do.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
We have, one of my
Yeah.
colleagues in the office here, her son is a helicopter pilot for the Army.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you, just last week, my son wants to be an aerospace engineer. And just last week, he was at some engineering camp that was put on by Pratt and Whitney and whatnot. He fired off a weather balloon, his little group. It went up to 95,000 feet.
That's
This weather
incredible.
balloon. I
That's
mean,
so
he's
cool.
17 and he just shot up a weather balloon at 95,000 feet. Sorry, FAA. He probably violated airspace. I'm really
Yeah.
sorry. I'm going to apologize right now. And, please don't get him in trouble. His life's ahead of him. Take me. So that was that's the gist of it, right?
Yeah.
You start thinking about what we're talking about, right? Life shaping experiences.
Hmm.
They're not in the classroom. They're not
No.
in a school, right? Where I'm not taking down school. I'm not talking it down. I think it is an important part of it. I think teachers have the most difficult job
Yeah.
out there, among the most difficult. I have the most respect for teachers because of what they have to go through, both with their own just office politics and bureaucracy, plus with children that's uneven learning, COVID, everything else. But you have to go beyond that. Right? You have to go beyond that because even the best teachers will tell you that this is just a dimension. There's other dimensions to it, right? There's other dimensions that go through it. We are social creatures when we're there. So your daughters, your daughter, the younger one is now finishing up at Clemson. So Clemson's a great school.
It is.
What was her essay like? What did she talk about in her essay to get her into Clemson?
I think she probably talked about her overcoming, the loss of her dad
Mhm.
and the resilience and persistence and all of that.
And nothing to do with her 6.0 GPA or 5.8 GPA or whatnot. And that's it, because I'm sure she was at the top, near the top of her class, and I was working hard. And you said the word driven before, which I think is amazing. Um, and the fact that you're she's heading that way. And I asked that question just because of the fact that the essay didn't talk about that, didn't talk about her GPA. It talked about a life altering experience, right? This was a difficult life altering experience, but one that she actually saw through, one that allowed her to become something. And God, I mean, she's one that obviously when she graduates and whatever she does, and you're all just in the Air Force, they're doing something to change the world,
They
right?
are. They are.
And that's the part of it. It's a boomerang that goes between what I would say, and I heard somebody say this: a life altering or life shaping experience leads to a life altering or life shaping action. And it's
I
not
love
your
that.
life, it's somebody else's life, right? So
Mhm.
if your life is shaped in a way, meaning that something alters the way your life is shaped, you are then empowered to shape somebody else's life in a positive way. And it was I forget that it was put very well. Life altering experiences equals altering somebody else's life.
I love that. I've never heard it, but I love
Oh,
it.
it's great. It was, I mean, clearly the person was a math teacher,
Mm.
but it's great. But that's what makes it special. That's so when we talk about education, right? So you mentioned Piedmont Airlines. When was your first travel adventure?
My first adventure that really shaped me was in was in my mid 20s. I backpacked through Costa Rica with a girlfriend of mine, and so that would have been back in the when would that have been? In the early 90s.
Mhm.
That was fun. But that was a big deal because we were there for 3 weeks and we kept all our stuff in San Jose, and then we would go out and then we'd come back, and this was before there were smartphones, before Google. So, you
Mhm.
really had to sort of figure it out, and neither of us spoke the language really. And
Mhm.
Costa Rica was a safe destination then. Of course, it wasn't as booming as it is now, and it,
Mhm.
it wasn't as accessible as it is now. But yeah, that was a
Sure.
big deal. I loved it.
I think it's yeah that's it's something similar. It wasn't backpacking, but it was something similar. For me, it was climbing Kilimanjaro. I
Yes.
was 14. Climb was one of the youngest to get up to that point in Kilimanjaro at that point. And it was incredible, right? I mean, just I my everybody thought my mother was crazy, right? So we were in I had gone back to Nairobi. My mother said, let him go climb. She put me in a what we call a matatu, a taxi, by myself with a bunch of people and said, just drive them across the border. Let me go on my own. It's basically, we're talking about almost 5 hours to the border. Then from there, changing cars to a second vehicle. There, somebody picked me up and took me over to Moshi, which is another 2 hours. Then from there, it was hooking up with the climb crew. And I was hiking with two brothers. One was a lawyer, the other one was in college, and I am this 14-year-old kid, looks like Mowgli from the Jungle Book, and going up. And I remember I learned about ecosystems, about biodiversity, about flora, about astronomy, every bit of it. And I'll tell you, and this is where this is leading to, right? And I'm willing to bet the same thing happened to you. I remember going up Kilimanjaro. I remember counting the shooting stars and looking up at the Milky Way and everything I was seeing. And people look at the shooting stars. I was trying to see planets. Obviously nobody has the Sky Scanner app now. You can see different planets, but I was trying to look at the constellations, where the moon was. We were above the cloud level. We were up, so you're starting to figure out, you knew where the Milky Way looked like. You knew what that looked like. How much distance. I would take the moon and I would close one eye like this and try to see the dark side of the moon and say, look, that's the sun. So that means the sun's over here, reflecting over here. Fast forward to when I was 18 years old. I was a sophomore in college, and it was my best class. I was in astronomy. I had taken 2 different levels, and I chose a university. And just so happened, the university I went to Arizona. They still to this day have built the largest telescope by diameter. It's 10.5 meters by diameter. It's up in Chile. One's up in Kids Peak in Arizona. And I got here and I started getting into astronomy, and I was getting into vector calculus and getting into how to calculate planetary movements and understanding, using my pinky to be able to tell how much a planet or a star has moved from one night to the next, which planet was Mars, which one was Jupiter, which one was Venus, where it moved, how it came through, where the movement was. Seeing something going past, really quickly across the sky. That's the Hubble Space Telescope that was launched. That's this one. Okay, that's there. Without a telescope, knowing which one, seeing my first comet, understanding all of it. Every bit of those experiences traces back to those stars I saw on top of Kilimanjaro. I was 14. So
at 14, did you have any awareness that you were getting an education, or were you just on
No.
an adventure?
I was on an adventure. And so I talked to a child psychologist about this, just in theory, because I was working with one to help put some programs together, and her husband and I were friends. So I was talking to her about this. And I was telling her the story.
Mm-hmm.
She said, and I'll paraphrase, but she said, subconsciously, children are always learning, and even adults. She goes, why do you think there's always this notion of putting classical music when your kids are sleeping, letting them hear classical music? It'll make them smarter, make them hear. It's not, whether it's believe it or not, what cannot be disputed is that subconsciously children are always learning. So even if at the face value, you or I as children are looking at something and saying, I'm on an adventure, your brain is in the background always computing. And what ended up happening, and when she said this to me, it registered. And the way I can describe it, if you see on TV, somebody sits down with a fortune teller, and the fortune teller says something, go, how did you know that? Right? That gadzooks moment.
Yeah.
So it was in astronomy class. And actually, I think it was looking at the telescope, the one they had built, and then actually going through and putting everything together. And I remember we were looking at planetary movements. There was a comet that was coming, and we were timing it with a lunar eclipse. Then there was a comet that was coming, and it's clear as sky. We knew where to go. And the whole time that my professor was talking to me about these stellar moons, we were talking about Andromeda. We were talking about all these different stars and whatnot and movements. And I looked at the vector calculus moment. All I could think about was those shooting stars on top of the Kilimanjaro. Now, most people will sit there and talk about, oh, it's a shooting star. I was sitting there in my mind at 14 going, how fast must that thing be going? Now, mind you, I had moved from Kenya to the US when I was 7. I got to see, I was in school when Challenger took off and sadly exploded. But we were watching, when they hear max velocity, all right, how fast is max velocity? In college, I'm living close to an Air Force base, and we actually had a couple of jets hit sonic boom too low over our university. Go back, how fast? That's 7 or 87 miles an hour. Okay, that's this. All right, that's that. All right, calculating it out. all of a sudden, everything from rate of acceleration to vacuums of space, to everything else, to mathematical equations, it all traced back to me seeing those shooting stars. I'm sitting there going, these stars are how many millions of miles away? That's that satellite's moving at 4,500 miles per hour. It's moving at a rate. It's this. The orbital gravitational pull is here. Okay, what happens here? Then there's a story of the Russian space station. One of it that had I think it was Skylab that had fallen in the 70s that had come back to Earth. Okay, so at what point did it leave the vacuum of space? What point did 9.8 meters per second squared take over and gravitational pull take over to pull this thing back into the Earth? All these things are hitting me, and I can trace it back to those shooting stars in Kilimanjaro.
Quite an impression. So it was probably not unusual for your mom to send you off by yourself, or maybe it was. Would you
No.
do that for your son? Would you
Oh yeah.
have you sent your son away off on his own?
We're sending him actually, as a matter of fact, to Texas on his own to go to another engineering camp because he wants to do it. We've sent him up to Canada on his own already. We're getting ready to send him to a couple of other places as well. So yeah, I mean, I would totally do it. I would happily do it. And I was really blown away when I saw what he was doing with this weather balloon. Because I wasn't expecting. I was expecting, his engineering. Okay, I'm putting an egg inside this, and it's got to land properly. And we're talking about, when he was talking to me, I'm like, hey, why don't you design your parachute like this? Propulsion's going to be like this. It's going to be using this. So I was getting into the science with him. But when he started doing this, all of a sudden it was a whole different level. So I'm like, okay, how do we do more of this? It was just, he was just on a different level talking about this. Now, mind you, I'm the dad who wrote down Newton's law of gravitational pull. I wrote that down for him when he was like 7. And I'm like, remember 32 feet per second squared and 9.8 meters per second squared. This is, rate times, distance equals rate times time and whatnot. And the coefficient is this and da, 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 da. And my wife is like, what are you doing? To the point where I went bungee jumping when my son was 4 years old.
Yeah.
And so then I sit down in the hotel room and I'm writing stuff down. My wife goes, what are you doing? And she sees 87.6 miles an hour or whatever. She goes, what is that? I said, I'm calculating at the exact spot where the bungee cord repelled. How fast was I going? She goes, what? And then she sees, 9.8. And my son was there and he goes, Dad, it's 9.8 meters per second squared. Don't forget to do this. And he's 4 years old.
Oh.
He didn't know what it meant, but he's like, Dad, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, it's registering. Now, all of a sudden, from 4 years old to now, he's shooting off a weather balloon at 95,000 feet. That's huge.
That's funny. It must be a dad thing. My late husband, used to do math problems with the girls at bedtime rather than bedtime stories.
Yeah.
And one of mine graduated with a master's in mathematics.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
There's proof right there. So let's shift over to you. Let's think about one of your adventures in the Coast Guard or one of your adventures traveling when you're an adult. Did you ever think about something you did as a child and that did your mind recall that? And I asked you that because the psychologist talked about that and it happened to me, right? My mind recalled those shooting stars. Did something happen in one of your travel journeys where your mind recalled something from when you were a kid?
I don't know if I can say yes. So as a kid, I spent my summers sailing and competitively racing and all of that. And I did that all the way through college. And
competitively racing, like running, track?
Sailing. No, sailing.
Ooh, okay, yeah, right on. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was really all I was good at in college was sailing. But so it stands to reason I would have joined the Coast Guard. But as a kid, when we were learning to sail, they made us take the rudder off the sailboat, small one-man sailboat, take the rudder off, and you had to learn to use your weight to shift the boat and steer the boat and navigate without a rudder. And it was all about moving your body around and all of that. And it was a great lesson. But, fast forward into the Coast Guard and then beyond into my professional career in the maritime industry, understanding how weight affects the trim of your vessel, it can take it all the way back to that experience as a kid of being rudderless
Hmm.
And, there's just so many other life lessons you learn from being rudderless. How to
Where
survive when you're rudderless. But.
where were you in the world when when this happened?
So I learned to sail on Lake Norman in outside of Charlotte.
Hmm.
But it was Alaska and out on the Oregon coast with my Coast Guard career, where I really learned about I everything that I had learned as a child, clicked in. I was like, oh, this is why this and this is why that, and yeah, this makes sense, of course. And I could just imagine and even just learning how to handle the vessel and
Hmm.
bring it in to moor it up. I would find myself shifting my own body weight on this huge boat. But it was the same thing. It was cool.
See that, and think about that, right? I mean, we weren't exposed to the type of just media onslaught that our kids are exposed to with social
Hmm.
media, right? I mean, the attention span that children have is just getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Do you remember when websites came out?
Oh yeah,
So
I do.
did you remember people who design elaborate websites, which if you could put a photo on some text on, that was a start. Oh, the
That was a
logo,
big deal. Yeah.
yeah, your logo goes to the left because your eyes go up and to the left. So put the logo here,
Hmm.
put this here. So I have a friend that works at Google, and he and I were in school together. So I was talking to him years ago, and and we were talking about attention span. And this leads into exactly with what you just talked about with your own experience sailing, right? He told me, I was talking about websites when it first came out and using, ASPX, or using, whatever basic languages they were, C++ and whatnot, and now getting into WordPress and everything else. You know what the average time is, the attention span we have for somebody to visit a website? 7 seconds. That's it. In 7 seconds, we lose their attention.
Hmm.
So when you were on that boat, you were listening, trying to
Hmm.
shift your weight back and forth. You weren't thinking in seconds, you were thinking in minutes and hours.
Oh, for sure. You had to be 100% in the moment. You can't lose focus. And I do miss that. I don't think I have that level of focus anymore. I think I have lost it because of everything you just mentioned.
Look at the medium we're on right now.
Hmm.
I mean, that's part of it, right? Who are our viewers are going to be watching this or listening to this on one of those mediums that's assaulting their senses,
Hmm.
right? And we're doing it in a positive way. Unfortunately, it's not all of it's positive.
Right.
But you just said the key word, and that's what actual life shaping experiences to travel are about. They're about being in the moment.
Hmm.
It's about taking you to that moment of being right there, right? I'll tell you, this just happened to me 2 days ago. So, and I told you about this, right? So well, everybody takes American history in school,
Hmm.
and you learn about the White House, you learn about Capitol Hill, you learn about these buildings, and I loved watching The West Wing when it was on, and even now I stream it. I love that
Me
show, right?
too. Yeah.
Martin Sheen, like, oh, it's he's back, the president's back, and one of the things that was said in one of the earlier seasons was about Washington, D.C. being the biggest home court advantage that anybody has ever had, right? Anybody that comes overseas or comes from a different country to visit, whether it's the president or visiting members of Congress, but getting up to Capitol Hill or getting to the White House, it is the biggest home court advantage. It's not, I want to say, intimidating, but there's a level of pomp and circumstance. It's a separate conversation about
Hmm.
what's happening to it now. That's a separate conversation. But if we just remove the politics from it and the pomp and circumstance. So I remember visiting Washington D.C. as a kid. I was actually, I'd gone and I was rafting in Delaware. I'd gone whitewater rafting in Delaware, and there was a trip that was going to DC. And I remember seeing the Washington Monument, seeing Capitol Hill,
Hmm.
and going, wow, this is, I was reading about Benjamin Franklin, reading about Thomas Jefferson, reading about all these guys, like, oh, wow, this is incredible. Look, there's the Lincoln Memorial. There's this. Then you see the West Wing, and you see, there's the president walking along Lincoln's Memorial, right? Or walking by Lincoln's Memorial and going to talk to Abe or whatever then you hear documentaries. Then you see Martin Luther King's, documentary on his I Have a Dream speech. And so this all was, I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is incredible. And I remember I had gone and visited with my kids as well. And I stood where Martin Luther King stood. I Have a Dream speech. I turned to the right and I read Abraham Lincoln's second inauguration speech. It was incredible. It's engraved on the side of the wall of the Lincoln Memorial. My jaw was on the floor because the whole time going, that's what my teacher was talking about. Those words, this is incredible. Look how heavy it is. And then thinking back in time, this was his second term. So which means we were in the heart of the Civil War, and he was this was his inauguration speech while the country was divided. Sound familiar? And these words, and you're like, God, how much pressure must he have been under? Well, Tuesday, where this is now Friday, the Friday before Father's Day, Tuesday, 2 days ago, I was invited to be part of a congressional caucus, and I got to go up on Capitol Hill. I got to meet with senators and representatives. I was in that building. I was in the Rayburn building. I was in the other building.
Part of history now.
I was in that building.
That's so cool.
I was there. I got to walk past, and West Wing was right. It is the greatest home court advantage there ever is. I walked in, and I remember walking. I'm going to go toe to toe with Titans, and I walked in, and my jaw was on the floor, going, "Wow! Look at these! Look at the doors." And I remember walking past the doors, going, "This is exactly as it is showed in the textbook. Look, there's this person, there's that person, there's this. Oh, there's that person. Oh, this is where this person's office was. Oh, okay, yeah, this is where decisions are made. This is where just like I was just a kid.
Were you trying to be cool, or were you rubbernecking?
I was trying to be cool as a cucumber.
Yeah.
I had a tie on. I was talking to, and the gentleman that was taking us around as part of our caucus, he was a former chief of staff of one of the representatives in Georgia. So we got to have a really good conversation, and we were talking about how things work, right? These points are off topic. And it was amazing because yesterday all over the news, or the day before all over the news, was about the vote they were having on the floor, right? And the vote was about politics and impeachment and whatnot. That's, again, a separate topic. It's not the topic of the vote. It's the fact, the pomp and circumstance. I met with these representatives, and then halfway through, they're like, okay, we need to leave. And then I watch them on TV walking into the same chamber where the president gives the State of the Union address. And I'm in the building. I'm in the building, and I'm talking to and I'm watching them on TV going, I just sat with that gentleman here, and we were talking about regulation. We were talking about legislative things. We were talking about this new position who's going to be technically a minister of tourism that the U.S. is finally going to have, and the requirements of this position. And they were listening. I went toe to toe with Titans. And I came out, and and yesterday somebody here said, did you know that it's Father's Day on Sunday? And I said, no. I mean, I knew it was Father's Day, but I didn't put the two and two together. And I walked out of the building, and I looked up, and I talked to my father. And I went to him, and I said, I got it, Dad. I said, look. I said, I went a few rounds. I went toe to toe with these guys. They listened to me. They didn't kick me out. They listened to what I had to say. We're asking them to co-sponsor some of these bills. We're asking them to understand what this legislation means. One of them's in final rule. What does it mean? Don't let it pass like this. This is the unintended consequences. We're talking about, and this is the part that dawned on me as I left. And it was literally, my legs got weak as I left Capitol Hill. And my legs got weak, and I kept thinking back to when I was a child visiting DC. And then when I was watching the West Wing, and then when I was in U.S. government, and I remember in high school, I was in Model UN, and I was the country that was supposed to be neutral, but ended up still being the aggressor.
What? You?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, Switzerland wasn't neutral with me anymore. But it was still this, just, you come out and I looked out at the Washington Monument and the water there, and I said, "This is where the speech happened.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the march happened." You start thinking of all these things in history. All these
Right.
moments were coming up. And I remember I walked out of that building. I took a picture in front of Capitol Hill. I remember the gentleman with us. He says, "Okay, we're going to go." I said, "Please, can I get a photo in the front?" What do you mean? And I explained to him. I said, I went to all these classes, and I said, when I came to DC, I was a kid. Between that moment and now, there was a long period of time where my father didn't think I was going to amount to much.
Mm.
As much as he tried, he just thought that I was messing up too much, and he thought that my fate was sealed, that I wasn't going to amount to anything. I said, I need him to see me in front of this building.
Mm.
I need him to see me here for him to know that I made something of myself, that I did something.
Yeah.
And that this is my gift to him on Father's Day. It's a gift I wanted to give him, and I should have given him when he was alive, and I'm giving him now, which is the fact that I made something of myself, and I did it with my own two hands, and I
Mm-hmm.
did it through hard work. And now walking in, and I'm having meetings with titans. Forget about the partisan politics. Forget about that. These are elected officials who are making rules for our country. They are following the Constitution. They are following the steps that were laid out in our Declaration of Independence. They are following through on something that was signed in 1776. They are part of that, and I became part of history.
Mm-hmm.
I became part of that story. I walked into that room, and oh man, if that's
Yeah.
not life altering, what is?
That's so
If
cool.
that's
So yeah, so things are still clicking for you from your
yes,
childhood.
yes. And that was what this child psychologist told me. This was
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago. She told me, she said, if you have the right life shaping experiences as a child, and specifically in the ages of 5 to 15, those 10 years, the influences you have in those years are going to have a direct correlation to who you are as an adult. And she said that I don't care if you are 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. You are going to have reflections. She said, your brain is the ultimate hard drive. Your brain is the ultimate hard drive. And she goes, and she's a Star Wars junkie like I was. So she said, if you ever see these scenes like from Rogue One, where this memory bank, where this computer is pulling out memory cards from here, putting it putting it there to recall all this information, your brain has the ability to do that and recall moments from whenever, even when you may not have been paying attention, your brain was.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that this became part of the story, and here I am 20 years later, and it's recalling. And last November, October, I was in Rwanda giving a speech with the sharing a stage with the president of Tanzania, the first woman president in the history of the country, sharing a stage with the president of Rwanda, with the vice president, or they were just there and whatnot, having their cabinet hear what I had to say on this stage. And he got to see that. And I was reflecting to him on when he took me on my first trip when I was 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And from that to being on stage in Rwanda. So from 12 years old and 11 years old and 12 years old, being in Delaware and being in DC, and meanwhile, we had nothing. We had no money. We had nothing, like 10, 12 years old, to now actually being in that building. And the best part is being invited back next year. So I get to do it
That's so
again
cool.
next year as well. I get to be part of this. So
That's really awesome. Well, but you know what? Because your mother knew at 14 when she sent you off to Kilimanjaro that if you can do that, what else can you do? It's not even just about it's the confidence that was built.
right,
It's not even about the knowledge that you gained. It's the confidence to know that
right.
you can accomplish something. You can be self-sufficient enough to
It's what you gave your daughters.
climb the Kilimanjaro of Washington, D.C., you know?
Right. I mean, it's what you gave your daughters, right?
Yeah.
It's the confidence that they have. Your daughter is now part of the Air Force. Your daughter has a master's in mathematics. She's going to use that in aviation. It's going to come into play every single way. Where we're heading, and take mathematics as a sidebar, right? Where we're heading in the field of artificial intelligence. The base program code is Python, right? For some of the
Yeah.
Python's all calculus.
It is. My daughter that's part of was her I don't understand it, but yes, she's having to do a lot of coding for her master's
I
thesis.
believe it. I believe it. And
Yeah.
it goes back to, you mentioned the key word, confidence. You can't learn confidence in a textbook.
Hmm.
As good as teachers are, they can bring it out, but they can't. It's there, right? Everybody has this. You know,
Hmm.
I whenever I hear somebody say, "Well, this person's not very confident," oh, hang on a second. That's taught, because
It
our
is.
natural instinct is to be confident. Because the only thing we need in this world to achieve success is ourselves, the ability and the desire to work hard. And what you said about your daughters, the drive.
Yeah.
If you have that, what else do you need?
Right.
Right. And so you're talking about, that's the word, right? I'll tell you that you talk about Kilimanjaro. You're right. It was confidence, because at 17, I came home from school my freshman year. I snuck out of the house and went skydiving. Didn't even tell them, and just went skydiving. I ended up tearing my Achilles in the landing and everything. And when I came back and showed my mother the video, the first question she told me, she goes, "Okay, when do I get to go?"
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Sounds like your mother's the adventurer
She's
in the
totally the
family.
adventurer.
Daredevil.
But that's, my father was not. My
That's
mother was
cool.
like up for anything. But
Good.
you just said the key word. It's confidence.
Hmm.
How much do we talk about that with today's children in school? Right, we're affecting their psyche, we're affecting their self-confidence, we're they're becoming very insecure, their social skills are starting to suffer or whatnot. And you know, we've talked about the effects of the pandemic, but in general, if you want to really bring out the confidence, because it's there, it is
Hmm.
in everybody. You know, when I hear somebody, "No, I'm just not very confident." Okay, I mean, somebody taught you to not be confident, because our
Right.
natural
Somebody
behavior is to
told
be
you didn't have
what it took.
whatever. Yeah.
Right, right.
Somebody told
And
you that.
right, exactly. Somebody told you that, exactly, and you made a choice, right? It's one choice is to say, you know, F you. I
Yeah.
have the drive. And another one that basically says, okay, you're right, I don't have the drive.
Hmm.
Right. And it's up to you to decide whether you want to basically say, I don't believe that,
Hmm.
versus something else. So that's part of it here, right? That becomes part of the conversation here. And I think that when I hear people, and this psychologist talked about this as well. She said, you know, that every child has confidence from, and I asked her, from what age do children start being confident? So she told me, what age do you think? What age? Go take a wild guess.
Do they start being confident?
Yes.
I mean, I think at birth, right? Aren't they? I don't know. What does she say?
That's exactly right. At birth.
They're
When
fearless. They are taught to be scared, and they're taught to be,
that's right.
yeah.
They stand up and they walk, and they're being taught to be afraid to fall. No, 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 you might hurt yourself. You might hurt yourself. Don't, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, obviously not doing something stupid, but yeah, it's exactly
I
right.
was guilty of that with my daughter. When
I
she
was
would
too.
fall, I would like,
Yeah.
and then my second daughter reminds me she fell out of a tree and came in the house with a pretty big gash.
Mm.
And I went, "Oh, that's a bummer. Let me get you. Let's clean it up." She goes, "Mom, you didn't even care." And it wasn't that I did care, but I wasn't going to freak out because I wanted her to still climb trees, But yeah, it was quite a contrast, and I think that's a whole, there's that whole birth order thing. There's definitely something to the firstborn
Uh,
doesn't get the benefit of that.
Well, look, I mean, obviously, we want to look out for our kids, right? We want to look out
Yeah.
for our kids. We want to make sure that they're not doing something stupid like jumping out of an airplane at 17. But the point is that's it's there. Here's so I said this to my father. So do you remember there's this place in New Jersey used to be open called Action Park?
No, I don't know about
Okay,
this.
this is basically amusement park for ghetto for the ghetto, right? So
Ah,
this is people who couldn't afford to go to Disney or go anywhere else. You went to Action Park. This is where you
hmm.
jump off a cliff and whatnot. So one of the streaming platforms now has a documentary on Action Park
Mm-hmm.
and how there were just these numerous deaths that were
Okay.
occurring on these rides because they weren't put together well, and that
Yeah.
there were issues, and they were defying laws of gravity and whatnot. And I went to my father because he was the one who was like, no, 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 be careful. I said, just for the record, you took me here I just want to make sure you know that. There's a whole documentary on how unsafe this place was. I said, you took me here. I jumped off a cliff and I actually jumped into the water because you said I should be able to do it. And I'm happy I did. But I just for the record want to tell you that this documentary now says that this place was a threat to my life.
The
And you
death
took me
trap.
here. So you can't say anything to me now. And so he started laughing and he goes, all right, fine. But that's exactly it. You've nailed it. At birth, that is
Mhm.
when our children are confident. And along the way, we beat them down to show them how all the ways that they shouldn't believe in themselves, right? Whether it's failing a test, whether it's telling them they're gonna hurt themselves, whether it's telling them that they're not gonna amount to anything, whether it's
Mhm.
telling them that the world's gonna eat them up if they're not careful, versus just simply saying, okay, let's go. Okay, let's go. Right. I took my son to Peru paragliding for his 16th birthday, and I went with him.
Mhm.
So it was last year. And I went paragliding with him. And I remember when we landed, he said, we went up to like almost 14,000 feet before we came down. He said, why did you do it with me? And he was terrified at first. He was happy, then terrified, then he took off. He was happy as all get out. My wife didn't go, and we went, and he goes, why did you do it with me? And I said, so you can remember I'm still the man. That was it. Your dad's still the man. And it was that bonding moment, right? We had to
Yeah.
joking about that and whatnot. But you fast forward, travel represents that. It represents the ability for kids to be confident. Take the biggest introvert that you have as a child, the person who has been beaten down to just be within themselves and not speak up in class. They're bullied in school, or they are taught to just stay quiet, or they're not heard, or whatever the case may be. Right? Society oppresses them in some way. And I use the oppression word as a loose term. I know that's a heavy word, obviously, but society has harassed them in some way. You put them on a trip. That real child comes out, whether it's the second day or the 10th day, but that real child
Mhm.
comes out at some point.
Mhm.
And that's huge. I'll tell you this story. This was something I will never forget. I was working with a family to plan an African safari through a travel advisor, and I heard this story that just blew me away. The child at 14 fell into a coma
Mm.
and was in the hospital, was completely comatose. And the parents would go every day and just beg this child to wake up. The father opened up a world atlas and said, son, please wake up. Point to anywhere on this map. I will go anywhere you point. I don't care what it is. I just need you to wake up. When he woke up 6 months later, he pointed to Africa. They ended up doing a whole 1 month safari through Africa. And I remember when it was like a celebration of life.
Mhm.
And in Botswana, I remember the mother broke down and said, and telling the guides, you have no idea what we've been through. And this child got to see, for he had never seen to this point, what his parents had been through.
Mhm.
He got to see for the first time what his parents had been through while he was in this coma. And I don't know if it was 6 months or 3 months, I forget the timeline, but he was there. But he saw for the first time. And all of a sudden, from that, it was like the fifth day of the trip. From that point forward, and before that, he was like, I'm gonna sleep in. I don't really want to. I'm gonna sleep in. So I'm gonna sleep in. I'm gonna relax. And all of a sudden, he starts from that point forward. He wakes up early every day. He takes part in every single activity. He goes and does everything. He's asking all the questions. He's doing everything. And all of it's there.
Mhm.
And here you go.
That's
It's
incredible.
and that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
The fact that life-altering decisions, life-altering experiences, life-shaping experiences are huge.
Yes, they are. And I think if we just um even starting small with your kids, like letting them camp in the backyard. If you have a backyard, letting them sleep in a tent in the backyard, or
Mm,
even sleep in the tent in the living room. But just like getting them out of their comfort zone, or I used to let my kids, even when we'd go to the park, they would think that they were exploring on their own, that I could see them the whole time. They couldn't see me, but
Yeah.
making them think they were out,
Right.
even that to start is a great place if you're not in a position to be able to take a big trip
Right.
straight away with your kids.
Right. 100%. 100%.
That's
100%.
good.
So
Yeah.
why
That's
don't we
good. Get
leave
them
it?
out there.
Why don't we leave it at that? Why don't we leave it on that at that point? Because next episode we're going to be talking. What are we going to be talking about next episode?
We're talking about life-shaping experiences for kids. So I think
Right.
we're going to talk more
Yeah, with those
about
specific
that.
experiences. Those
Hmm.
specific experiences. So we're gonna find out. Maybe at some point, if one of your daughters wants to be on this podcast with us, I would love to have one
Oh,
of them.
I'll
I think it
see
would
if
be
one
great.
of them would do
You
that.
want to find? Let's find out.
My younger daughter is working in Alaska this summer as a deckhand on a sightseeing boat, and she's with kids day in and day out,
Let's ask her. Let's
as
ask
a
her.
as a guide and deckhand. It's interesting. So I'll see if
Let's.
she can. See if she'll
Okay,
join us.
that'll be great. That'll be great. So,
Yeah.
well, this has been amazing.
This has been fun.
This has been fun. Till next
Hey,
time, everybody.
happy Father's Day, my friend.
Thank you.
Yep. Wear your
And
shirt. Let your
I
kids
will wear my
let
shirt,
your
the
kids
database,
love all over you and do all
and
the
to
things kids do.
and to your late husband, happy
Oh,
Father's Day to
thanks.
him as well.
Thank you, my friend. All right.
All
Till next
right.
time.
Till next time. Take care.
Thank you for listening to The Sustainable Voice. If you have a success story of your own, please reach out and share it with us. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.